Hello, ghosties. You're listening to Not My Ghost.
Not my problem. I'm Kelly.
And I'm Jen.
Whether you're a skeptic, a true believer, or somewhere in between, join us for a journey into the unknown.
Because remember, when it comes to the paranormal, it may not be our problem.
But it's certainly someone's problem. I wish that Florida and Maryland were closer together. Could we make that happen?
We can try. We can try really hard.
All right.
I was going to say I don't miss the tech issues of recording in person, but we had some fun tech issues just trying to set back up recording virtually today. So
I would like to say that they were not my tech issues and they were not my problem.
they were my tech issues and they were my problem. But Kelly thought they were her tech issues.
Well, mainly because you led me to believe they were my tech issues.
Well, I'm sorry. The mute button on my microphone is on the other side and I can't see it.
You know, it is what it is. We are here now. We fixed it all. We are overcoming challenges today.
Overcoming challenges.
This is the last one we're going to do.
Yes. Last challenge to be overcome. Everything's going to be great.
For a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Forever.
So this is our scripted, unscripted banter part of the podcast.
Woo, woo.
And Jen, I have a question for you.
Yay. What's your question?
Now, I saw this question on an Instagram reel, and I wanted to grab the name of the person, but you know, when Instagram decides it's going to refresh itself, whatever you were looking at is lost in the void.
Lost forever. And if you try to go back and find it, you can never find it.
Never. I really wish they would stop that. Do you know how in the Catholic Church, or really in any Christian religion, when they take communion, they say like the wine is the blood of Jesus and the wafer or bread or whatever they're using is the body of Jesus, right?
Yes.
So what liquid and food would represent the body of Jen?
For sure, wine. Like, no other option. It has to be wine.
That's boring. That's what Jesus did.
I am sorry. It's the liquid I drink the most.
Bourbon.
I mean, I like bourbon, obviously, but I don't drink it as much as I do wine.
All right, fine. You can be like Jesus.
Mine's not like a sweet grapefruit wine. Mine is like a dry, bold, oaky Cabernet.
Well, I don't know what kind of wine Jesus drank. Do you? He just poured water into it.
Right. Well, whenever I did communion, it always was like a sweet grapefruity thing.
Well, that's because they just use grape juice. Not grapefruit, just grape juice.
Okay. Well, yes, whatever. But mine is that bold, oaky Cabernet, Merlot, Pinot, something rich.
Okay. And the body?
Pizza.
That's not a bad combination.
Yeah. Wine and pizza. I mean, people would come to my church.
Yes, they would. For me, mine would be an iced brown sugar shaken espresso from Starbucks and a bite of Ben & Jerry's strawberry cheesecake ice cream.
You better make sure that you have your supporters do that, like teething. Is that what tithing? Whatever that thing's called.
Tithing.
Because you're going to need teething because you're going to need that amount of money from them just to cover your communion.
Oh, that's fine. It's religion. I can demand my followers pay whatever because I'm the god of it.
Absolutely.
Right. So if they want to be my follower and like, let's be honest, I'm going to bring them great things. And if I am God, I'm going to end things like, I don't know, child cancer.
Yeah.
Child abuse, things like that. So I think I'd earn it.
Sorry. There's still that gnat flying around and it's driving me crazy.
I was wondering what you were doing. For those of you wondering, we can see each other when we record.
Yes.
So Jen just did a little like head bop thing. And I was like, what's going on?
Yeah, it looked really weird.
So we should get into today's episode.
Yes. Yes, we should.
Welcome to another spine-chilling episode where we uncovered the eerie and the unexplained. Today we are diving into the dark and mysterious world of skinwalkers, or the Yee-Nadagushi as the Native Americans would call them, which we will call flesh pedestrians from this point on out of respect for Navajo Nation.
And the reason we chose that name is we have heard it on other podcasts. I think the first podcast I ever heard it on was Morbid, a true crime podcast. So go listen to them because they're awesome. And Two Girls, One Ghost also has used flesh pedestrians as well. So we're just sticking with the name that other people call it.
Right. And I think it accurately, it's enough information to know what we're talking about when we say it. Flesh pedestrians are said to be malevolent witches with the ability to transform into any animal they desire, moving swiftly and silently through the night. These shapeshifters are believed to gain their powers through unspeakable acts, becoming pure evil upon initiation. We'll explore the legends and the lore surrounding flesh pedestrians, delve into the chilling stories passed down through the generations, and hear firsthand accounts from those who claim to have encountered these sinister beings. So turn off the lights, settle in, and join us as we unravel the terrifying tales of flesh pedestrians. You might just start to question if that rustle in the bushes or that howl in the night is something far more sinister than you have ever imagined.
I'm going to say I'm excited for this episode. This is just a topic that's always fascinated me and terrified me in the same. So I'm excited to get to learn a little bit more.
Yeah. And I've got some interesting stories. One of them is from my daughter's boyfriend, his experience. And the other is just a funny thing I'm going to share about one of my daughter's ex-boyfriends.
Oh, fun. Love it. Can't wait.
But first, we're going to do some fun facts and scary facts about Navajo Nation. The Navajo tribe has an impressive weaving tradition. The Navajo are renowned for their intricate weaving skills, especially their beautiful rugs and blankets. Navajo weaving is highly prized for its quality and design, often incorporating vibrant colors and complex patterns that have been passed down through generations. A group of Navajo men, known as the Navajo Code Talkers, developed an unbreakable code based on their native language. This code played a crucial role in the United States military operations in the Pacific Theater, greatly contributing to Allied victories during World War II.
I absolutely love that they just have their own code that no one else knows.
The Navajo have a rich tradition of storytelling, with myths and legends that explain natural phenomena, cultural practices, and moral lessons. These stories are often passed down orally and play a vital role in the preserving Navajo heritage and teaching the younger generations about their history and values.
Also fascinating to me. I love the culture and all of that. And just, it's always fascinated me. And it's been such an interesting way that they just pass down all these stories and it's still alive today. Just amazes me.
Yeah. So we have some scary and not so fun facts.
Okay.
So the Navajo Nation, which spans across parts of Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah, is a primary location for flesh pedestrians, which we will be talking about today. Many stories and sightings come from this area, are deeply rooted in Navajo culture and beliefs. Located in northeastern Utah, Flesh Pedestrian Ranch is infamous for a wide range of paranormal activities, including flesh pedestrian sightings. The ranch has been the subject of numerous investigations and documentaries due to the high frequency of unexplained phenomena reported in the area.
I think with that area too, it's more than just sightings of flesh pedestrians.
It's UFOs and
all of that stuff.
Yep. So there's also the Four Corners region. This is the area where the states of Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Colorado meet. It's known as the Four Corners, and it is a hot spot for flesh pedestrian encounters. This region is rich in Native American history and folklore, contributing to the prevalence of flesh pedestrian stories.
I definitely did not know that the Four Corners was a hotspot. I want to visit there one day because it's my goal to check off all of the states in the United States.
Oh, so you can knock 4 of them off real quick.
I've already been to Arizona, so I'm really only getting 3.
So in researching for this episode, I learned a lot about Flesh Pedestrians, stuff that I had not really even heard in other places. A little history on Flesh Pedestrians. Particularly among the Navajo, Flesh Pedestrians are believed to be shapeshifters who can assume the form of any animal, allowing them to move swiftly and hide in plain sight. According to legend, one becomes a Flesh Pedestrian through initiation into the witchery way, which involves committing heinous acts like murdering a close relative. And that is just step 1. The other steps are so evil and so vile, we will not discuss them on this podcast out of respect for the Navajo Nation. Those who undergo this initiation are considered to be pure evil. Interestingly, in this culture, most witches are believed to be male.
That is very interesting.
That was different.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the history of Flesh Pedestrians is steeped in mystery and terror. The Navajo people, whose traditions and belief form the foundation of these legends, see them as an embodiment of corruption and malevolence. Unlike benevolent healers or shamans, Flesh Pedestrians are feared and reviled, their very existence a reminder of the potential of darkness within the human soul. Throughout generations, stories of these shapeshifters have been passed down, each tale more terrifying than the last. Accounts of strange creatures seen at the edge of forests or animals that don't quite move naturally, and the encounters that leave witnesses questioning their own senses. These beings are said to possess the power to control the creatures they mimic, moving with unnatural speed and silence, making them nearly impossible to detect.
That is terrifying.
It really is. Flesh Pedestrians draw their power from the natural landscape of the Navajo Nation. This connection to the land is integral to their abilities. But does it mean they are confined to this area? Not necessarily. It is said that a highly skilled Flesh Pedestrian could possibly venture beyond Navajo Nation, adapting to new terrains, like, say, the East Coast, and learning how to navigate the mountain ranges of the East Coast.
Nope. They can stay far, far away from the East Coast. Thank you. We don't want them here.
Well, they would also have to learn new animals that are available out on the East Coast and how to shapeshift into those.
Sorry, could you imagine a Flesh Pedestrian alligator?
I think it would be pretty funny. By the way, have you seen Thursday?
I have not seen Thursday or Friday.
Oh, those are our alligators out in St. Augustine.
Yes, they're called, the one my parents used to see all the time only would see them on Friday at this little like holding pond. And then when we were driving by and I was trying to see if Friday was there and we did not see it, it was Thursday. And as we were then driving down the road, Kelly saw another alligator. Could have been the same one, but it was a little ways down the road. Just chilling out on the side of the road, getting ready to go back into the swamps. So we named him Thursday. But that would be terrifying.
It would be pretty terrifying. So they would have to adapt to new terrains and new animals. However, such a feat would require immense skill and adaptation. There are some limitations to shapeshifting. These beings are renowned for their shapeshifting abilities, but the process is far from simple. To transform into an animal, a Flesh Pedestrian must kill, skin, and perform rituals on the creature. This makes shapeshifting into small animals, like poodles, very impractical.
You did that on purpose.
I have seen, do you know how many videos I have seen online of people thinking their poodles are a Flesh Pedestrian?
Don't talk about poodles.
There's a lot of them out there.
My poodle is not. I can promise you that.
Well, that's what I just said, is it's not. Ellie is fine, Jen. Ellie is not a flesh pedestrian.
I worry.
In the Navajo Nation, common skins include the coyote, the buck, and the wolf, with the bear and the mountain lion being rare due to their sacred status. Now, these are animals in Navajo Nation that are the most prevalent, that you would run across the most.
Makes sense.
So most of them, like I said, are coyotes, bucks, and wolves. But with the bear and the mountain lion being considered sacred animals to Navajo Nation, it is said that it is a lot harder to turn them to the dark side.
That's good, because that would change the whole do you want to meet a bear or a man in the forest alone conversation if we thought the bear also could be a flesh pedestrian.
That is true. I'd probably still take flesh pedestrian, but
I probably would too.
So some of the techniques that flesh pedestrians would use are interesting. Reports abound of people hearing their own voices mimicked to them in the distance, a tactic used by flesh pedestrians to lure victims towards them. Can you think about that for a second? If you're like, I don't know, say you go to the pool and then you hear your voice over by where your car is parked calling you.
Nope.
People are like, what is that? What is going on? And a lot of people will walk towards it or pay attention to it to figure out what is happening.
No, if I heard my voice calling me, I would nope right out of there, because just no.
Here's my thing. Would I recognize my voice? Because when I listen back to these podcasts, I'm like, I don't sound anything.
Well, now
like
you
that.
would, because you listen to yourself on the podcast.
Right. Another method that they use involves dog whistles. In the rural expanse of Navajo Nation, homes are very isolated, and dogs serve as protectors. So if your dog starts barking in the middle of the night and then suddenly stops, it could be due to a flesh pedestrian using a bone whistle to silence them, while the flesh pedestrian has the opportunity to move closer to your home or inside of your home.
Nope.
I have a story. I'm trying to decide if I want to share it now or if I want to share it at the end of the episode with the rest of the stories. I'm going to do it at the end with the rest of the stories, but please remember the dogs barking and the dogs going silent. So some of the weapons that flesh pedestrians would use are known as bone weapons and curses. So flesh pedestrians are often referred to as grave robbers or Navajo witches, known for creating natural-based weapons. They dig up graves to collect bones, using the flesh for poisons and the bones for knives and darts. Some bodies, when they would dig them up, they would just be bone. But if a body has not finished decaying and there is still flesh on it, they would turn that flesh into a poison.
Ugh, gross.
One terrifying method they use involves blowing bone powder into the victim's face, causing paralysis and a deadly curse. If not treated with a ceremony, very soon after the bone dust is blown in the face of the person, they don't find a shaman and they don't get a ceremony to cleanse them of that curse, they will die.
I don't like that at all.
So one of the most frightening aspects about flesh pedestrians is their incredible speed. There are stories of people driving at high speeds, like 85 to 100 miles an hour. There's not a lot of cops around this area.
Fair.
You imagine driving 85 miles an hour down a road and see a figure running alongside your car, keeping pace with your car.
Nope.
However, their most powerful weapon is fear. By instilling terror, that's how they can paralyze and control their victims. So they will use your own fear to paralyze you so they can get close to you to blow that bone dust in your face.
I don't like any of this. None of it.
No, I mean, it's all pretty terrifying.
It is. It's absolutely terrifying.
So how can you protect yourself?
Yes, please.
From these dark entities?
Let me know.
One traditional method, and the most common, it's hard to find a lot of the information on the other methods because a lot of this stuff is considered sacred and they do not speak about it.
Absolutely.
But the most common and traditional method that I could find is using ash from a fire. So you will have a fire, you have the ash, it cools, you pray over it, and then the ash can be applied to yourself or around your home as a protective barrier.
Okay.
Now, while there are countless videos and stories of supposed flesh pedestrian encounters outside of the Navajo Nation, it is important to approach these with skepticism. Many claims of pets or relatives acting strangely is likely attributed to other phenomena like shapeshifters, doppelgangers, or other spiritual beings capable of mimicking voices. So for the flesh pedestrians themselves, for the Navajo flesh pedestrians, they are contained typically, as we talked about earlier, in Navajo Nation, because it is not likely that they would venture outside of that because it takes a lot of skill and a lot of adaptation. Most of the time, when you hear of things that are outside of Navajo Nation, nobody is denying those experiences. But for it to be considered a flesh pedestrian sighting, it would be contained within the Navajo Nation. But there are other things out there.
Yeah, things that are similar. Like I know in a lot of the podcasts and stuff I've listened to, I think they focus less on the Navajo Nation, which now makes me think that it's more likely like a shapeshifter or something else, because there tend to be more human type interactions that from the stories that I've heard. So this is actually very educational because I just thought it was all flesh pedestrians.
Yeah. So, and remember the power, they draw their power through the landscape of the Navajo Nation.
Right.
So again, it's not impossible to see them outside of it, but it's also not probable. So now we're going to get into the stories. So I'm going to tell first a funny story about Emily's ex-boyfriend. So when Emily was dating him, we were taking a family trip to Iowa to visit relatives. And her boyfriend started freaking out that a flesh pedestrian was going to get her, which we now know.
Yeah.
Not a flesh pedestrian outside of Navajo Nation, but that was his belief. And he was like, don't be outside at night, which just cracked me up. The whole thing just kind of made me laugh. But this ex-boyfriend was not necessarily a very nice guy. And he would be very controlling of certain things. Before Emily broke up with him, if he was really getting on her nerves, she would FaceTime him and she would go outside of our house and she would whistle, because it is said that whistling will attract a flesh pedestrian to you. And he would freak out. And you know what? I just think it's good. Only because he was the ass that he was.
Yes, fair.
I think it's kind of funny.
Yes, we don't condone scaring good people, just assholes.
Right. That was her little way of getting back at him before she, came to terms with the fact that she needed to break up with him. And she's a very smart girl.
Was he Native American or did he just have these fears for other reasons?
He was Mexican.
Okay.
And you do find there are a lot of flesh pedestrian stories and fear in Mexico.
Okay.
Now, he didn't live in Mexico.
But the stories would have passed down, I'm sure. So, okay.
So as we learned earlier, houses in Navajo Nation are very isolated. They're very far apart from each other. So your closest neighbor may be a mile and a half away from you. So everybody out there has dogs. And some of the dogs are herding dogs, and some of the dogs are just for protection. You also have coyotes that roam the area. So in the evenings, you pretty much get used to falling asleep to the sound of coyotes and dogs howling and barking. It's just a common noise that you hear. Devin's father has property in Arizona, in Navajo Nation.
Okay.
So Devin was outside with his dad and they were camping. Devin's father was in the army. There's not a lot that scared the man. There was like one of his neighbors had a lot of cartel activity going on and he wasn't bothered.
Okay.
And that says a lot about how unafraid he is of most things.
Yeah.
So they were camping and all the, like we said, all the coyotes and the dogs howling. And then it went silent.
Oh no.
And when everything stopped, his father was like, no. Then they heard a coyote that sounded like a coyote, but not quite like a coyote.
Nope.
And it was only about 100 to 150 feet away from where they were, where they could hear the sound. And Devin said, his dad, who's afraid of nothing, grabbed him and his sibling and said, run to the house. And they all ran into the home. And after a while, they started to hear all of the animals howling again. So he does believe he was very close to a flesh pedestrian.
I don't like that at all.
No.
I would have run away from the home into a car and just kept driving forever.
That's a lot harder to do out there with the condition of some of the roads.
Yeah, I guess, but
I am assuming that his dad had protections
fair
in the home. So being someone that grew up or that has this property in Navajo Nation probably is very familiar with the lore behind everything, what to look out for. I mean, he knew when those animals stopped that we're in trouble.
Right.
I just thought that was very interesting to have, somebody that's close to the family that actually has I had researched all of this. And then I talked to him about his experience because I remember he said he had one, but I couldn't remember any of the details about it because it was a while ago. And to have his story so perfectly fit into the research that I found, like with the dogs going silent and, like that whole thing, I was like, wow, that's pretty amazing.
It just kind of validates the whole thing a little bit more.
With that said, we are going to read some listener stories.
Yay.
Well, a listener story. We have a listener story.
Okay.
And then I have a story that I pulled off of Reddit.
Okay.
So listener Grayson sent in this story. She says, this story was after a hurricane called Irma. I don't remember what year it was, but it was a strange encounter. It was around 7:30 at night. Around this time, I always took a stroll around my town due to it being so calm and relaxing. I was headed to Justin's house. The dirt road had plenty of rocks and sticks. On my left is woods and swamp. Then on my right, it was houses. But there was a small house with a driveway on the left with a large beware fence. I had a cold chill. That's when my senses heightened. I turned on my flashlight. I turned to my left. And I fucking saw a naked old man. Or that creepypasta thing, the rake. As I stood there, that thing climbed up a tree while I fucking booked it towards my friend's house. I knocked on his window and he looked at me confused. What the fuck is going on, dude? Justin said. I saw a naked man or something. He laughed and opened his window to let me in. That night went as normal until 2 days later, when leaving Greg's house around the same time, I saw torches in the swamp, not normal flashlights, but 1700 type torches. I heard weird chanting while they marched. But the weird thing, I didn't hear any of the brush moving. That's when I booked it home.
Yeah, probably smart.
Now, I don't know where Grayson lives, but Grayson did acknowledge that it could possibly be a rake, which is another thing we'll do an episode on.
Yeah.
It could be a shapeshifter. It could be a doppelganger. It could be a rake. It could be anything, but it kind of fit into the weirdness of Flesh Pedestrians. Yeah.
And that's kind of, like I said before, I've heard all of my stories about Flesh Pedestrians being more humanoid type creatures instead of animals, which is why it was very interesting to kind of learn that they more so present themselves as animals in Navajo Nation. But the fact that it was an old man naked, that's weird. But then he climbed up a tree. Like,
yeah,
I want to know like what type of tree it was. Like, was it a tree that had like, was it a good climbing tree? Because, as kids, we all like to climb trees. And you always had those good ones that you had out many branches and they were easy to climb. And then you had the ones that were not good climbing trees.
Yeah.
And I kind of picture it being a not good climbing tree and him just being like, and climbing up.
Yeah, running up like a bear.
Yes, really creepily.
Yeah.
That's the picture that I have.
Well, Grayson, if you're listening to this, and we know you are, we love you. Write in and let us know what kind of tree you think it was.
Yeah.
And we can we can update the listeners in a later episode.
And we don't need specifics. Like, I don't care. Was it an oak, pine? Like, I don't need all the specifics. Just, was it a good climbing tree?
Yeah.
Or was it not a good climbing tree?
Yep.
Because everyone knows the difference.
So this story I pulled off of Reddit and I found it compelling. And I liked the fact that it took place in Navajo Nation. This is from, let's see, the Reddit name is Lindsay2983.
Okay. Thank you, Lindsay. 2983.
So she writes, I have a story. It isn't mine, but it happened to my uncle. He used to tell this story when we went camping, and it scared the daylights out of me every time I heard it, which I love because this is a story that goes kind of back to Navajo storytelling tradition.
Right.
You're hearing the story over a campfire. So I was already hooked. We live in Utah, and my uncle Mark went on a Mormon mission at 19. For those who don't know, Mormons can serve a mission. I think they recently changed the ages in which this happens, but I'm not positive. It used to be at 19, men would go, and at 21, women would go. Men would serve 2 years and women would serve 18 months. If that has changed, which I think it has, you could look it up, but I'm not up on all of my current Mormon information.
That's fair.
So Uncle Mark went on a mission at 19. They sent him to a Native American reservation in Arizona. They paired him with a companion named Carl. When they first got there, there was a huge rift with the locals on the reservation because they were there. They didn't want my uncle and Carl staying on the reservation grounds. Eventually, they came to a compromise that they would stay on the outskirts in a trailer. This reservation wasn't very big, and it was located next to a heavily wooded area. The first night, they were trying to sleep when all of a sudden, their trailer started to shake violently back and forth. Startled and not sure what was happening, they climbed under the table for cover. Mark could distinctly hear something pushing it from both sides of the trailer, like a group of people. After about 5 minutes, it stopped. So they were thinking they didn't want us here.
Right. They're pushing us out. They're doing something to scare us.
Right. So the next day, they made rounds on the reservation and they were talking to the locals. Carl made a comment to one of the families that their trailer was shaking the night before. The family got very quiet and told them they had to leave. They thought it was strange, but they didn't think too much of it. The next night, it happened again. They awoke to their trailer shaking back and forth. Again, they climbed under the table until it stopped. This went on for 2 more nights. Anytime they tried to talk to anyone about it, they got quiet and told them to leave. Mark started thinking that due to the tension of their arrival, the locals were doing this to scare them off the reservation. They go into a convenience store, and they were talking together about how frustrated they were with the situation. The clerk overheard and said, "They can't talk about it. It's forbidden." Confused, they asked him, "Can't talk about what?" The guy continues to tell them about Flesh Pedestrians. He says they are evil demons or witches that were once Native American witches. If they talk about it, the Flesh Pedestrians will come for their souls. They just walked out of there baffled. They thought it was another scare tactic. So that night, when the shaking started again, my uncle decided to be brave and confront them.
Oh, no, 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 no. No. Hide under that table.
He went to the trailer door, flew it open, and yelled, "Hey!" When he did that, he saw 3 animals run off. 2 were a wolf, and 1 was a bear. Now, as we learned, bears are uncommon to be seen.
Uncommon, yes.
So the fact that the darkness was able to overtake the bear means this was a pretty highly skilled, evil flesh pedestrian.
Nope, I'm out.
They looked strange, almost with human features. As he watched them run towards the trees, all 3 stood up on 2 legs and walked slowly into the forest, making human cackling, laughing sounds. It scared him so bad that they called their mission president the next morning and asked to be moved. They were relocated that day, and for a year, nothing happened. Now, a mission president is each area. They say they're in my area, they'll have like a Baltimore mission area. So that Baltimore mission area is going to have a mission president that oversees all of the missionaries in that area. So they called their mission president and said, "We need to get out of here." And they were moved, and nothing happened for about a year.
I would have, I don't even know. Like, I can't even tell you what I would do in this situation besides cry. That's about it. Go into the fetal position and just start shaking and crying.
Right. So one day they announced that Carl was being relocated to another city, and Mark was getting a new companion, Jimmy. They had to drive for about an hour to pick Jimmy up from the airport. The road they traveled went through the boundaries of the reservation. They arrived at about 8 p.m. and met Jimmy. And then they went to leave. The mission president tells Jimmy, "We are driving through a dangerous area at night, so we cannot make any stops. If you need to use the restroom, you need to go now." Jimmy says, "I am fine." The mission president gets very serious enough to freak Mark out, and said, "I'm not kidding. Go do your business." Jimmy was insistent that he was fine. So they hit the road. As they were about 30 minutes into the drive, and they were going through the area of the reservation boundaries, Jimmy started complaining that he needed to pee.
Of course he did, because he didn't freaking listen.
Of course. Right. The mission president said, "We can't stop here. You'll have to hold it." Jimmy kept going on and on. "I really can't hold it." So the mission president stops the car and says, "Okay, but you will do your business next to the door. And if I say get in the car, you better get in the car fast." With a look of confusion, Jimmy says, "All right," opens the door and starts to do his business. In about 5 seconds, the mission president says nothing and just yanks Jimmy into the car and floors it. Jimmy and Mark start freaking out. What's going on? The mission president says nothing and just increases his speed. Suddenly, Mark sees something next to the car to his right. A giant wolf-looking man was running 2 feet next to the car. Mark looked at the speedometer and they were going over 60 miles per hour and still increasing. The wolf creature kept right next to the car for about 10 minutes until it finally took off into the trees. Shaking, Jimmy gets out of the car when they arrive. They didn't speak through the whole ordeal and says, "What did I just see?" And the mission president says, "Next time I tell you to take care of your business, you take care of your business."
Good response.
So I was like, whoa, that's kind of creepy. Now, we watched an episode of, and I'm going to mess up the name, Expedition Fear? Was that it?
Yes.
About Flesh Pedestrians.
Yes.
So they go out and they are talking to some of the Navajo people. And one of the things they are told, if you're unsure if you're dealing with a flesh pedestrian, to look at their feet, because their feet will always be furry or have hooves, whatever, like the animal that they are, of the skin that they are using.
Yeah. And this was specific to if they were see like a hitchhiker that looked like a human.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
They definitely said if you see a hitchhiker that looks like a human, look at their feet.
Look at their feet.
Because they will try to use hitchhiking as a way to get close to people.
Yes.
So they are driving through Navajo Nation in the middle of the night, and they see someone walking on the side of the street. So as they're driving and they pass this guy walking on the side of the street, the guy looks at the woman and says, "Did you see his feet?" And she said, "Yes." And they said it looked like hooves. It looked like he had hooves for feet.
And this was all caught on camera.
Yes. So they drive a little bit further down and they turn around because they want to backtrack to find this guy again. And they're in the middle of nowhere. There's nowhere this person could have possibly have gone. So they turn around within minutes. I mean, minutes, like maybe 2.
Yeah.
If that. They turn around and they drive back the exact way that they just were. And this man is nowhere.
Nope. Nope, right out of there.
He did not have time. He did not have time to get far enough off the road where they wouldn't have been able to see him. They had lights and all of that they could use.
There wasn't woods nearby or anything.
No. He just disappeared.
And when you go back and look at the footage, it's blurry. Obviously, they were driving at, regular speed on a back road, but it definitely looks off. The feet look strange.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up this episode, remember that while the legend of Flesh Pedestrians is deeply rooted in the Navajo culture and landscape, it is unlikely for them to be the cause of strange occurrences outside of this context. However, the world is full of mysteries, and the line between reality and legend is often blurred. Stay curious, stay safe, and most importantly, keep your ash close by.
I'm keeping my ash very close.
And that brings us to the end of this episode about Flesh Pedestrians.
If you absolutely loved what you heard, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Your support really does help. It helps us get more listeners and allows us to continue to share all these spooky stories with you.
And don't forget to follow us on Instagram and on Facebook at Not My Ghost, Not My Problem. We post updates, photos, and more, especially when we're together in person.
And we actually just started today, as in the day we're recording, not today, the day this was released, but doing something every day, at least want to try, just some type of fun interactive post that you can join in. Some of them are just spooky stories. Some of them are paranormal trivia. We're going to have fan featured Fridays. So a lot of cool stuff going on our socials.
Absolutely.
And if you want even more ghostly content, because everyone knows you cannot get enough of us, please consider joining our Patreon. We have some fantastic exclusive perks for our supporters, which currently we have 2.
We can actually say supporters now.
We can say supporters now.
That's exciting.
The more we get, the more perks we're going to give you all.
What's up, Danny?
Yay! And if you have ever had any spine-tingling paranormal encounter, please share your story with us at notmyghostpodcast@gmail.com, and you might just hear it featured on a future episode.
Thank you for joining us on this frightening exploration of Flesh Pedestrians. Remember, as you travel through the desert of the Navajo Nation, keep this in mind.
If it's not your flesh pedestrian,
It's not your problem.
until next time, stay spooky.
And stay skeptical.